get underneath here. It's a challenge to reach into some of these tight spots, but you can see I'm bending the fabric of the sandpaper here to do the reach that I need. And sometimes I need to be a little bit flexible and use a lot of care and attention in there. So trying to get that surface nice and smooth. You can see I left a little spot under the chin there that I'm trying to get out. But that's the process. That's what's going on here. I'm trying to smooth this surface up. It's at its first sanding, and I'm just getting into the second sanding. And you're here with me. My name's Lyle Sopel, and you're here with me in my studio. And we're working on a jade genie that's been in the studio for some time now. And it's a special request piece that I just had all kinds of time to do. It wasn't a thing that was necessarily needed to be finished right away. So it took a really long time, but it was a special request for a friend. And here it is. It's a piece that he's always wanted. And so I've got to the point where I've got the detail in with the face, and I'm trying to get the surface of the stone smoothed out well enough. So what I did to start with is I used a diamond grit in there. It was a 60 grit diamond. And first I carved it, and then I went in with it a 60 grit, and now I'm just kind of going over that surface with a 220 grit diamond. And so I can see that I'm taking out some of the major scratches and so on. And with this flexible little pad that I've made up, I can reach into these tight spots and smooth that surface in there. So I'm still contemplating whether or not that I would actually polish this. And I know that when I do, or if I do polish on a surface like this, that I'm gonna lose a lot of the features. And then, you know, human anatomy has all these really delicate forms that are very sensitive to light. And if I take them out, with a polish, I mean, if I shine it, then it's going to be very difficult to see the subtleties. And if you don't see the subtleties, then it's going to be quite unrecognizable, I would say, or very difficult to see that it has the character that I put into it. So, you know, I think I just might leave it as a matte finish rather than to go too shiny. So when it's glassy, I don't get to see those features. But we've got all the other parts of this piece complete, and they're sitting over here. Now this is the steam or the smoke part of the genie. And here we've got a lamp that's made up out of it's jadeite, and it's not finished yet, but it's getting there. I think it's got just the surface carved and a little bit of sanding done to it. And this piece here, it's on some pins, but it's a different kind of jade than the male part of this piece is. It's a lighter color, and it has a lot more of a smoky look to it, which is what we want. I'm going to put this here, like I've got 2 pins on the bottom, 2 holes and then 2 pins. And I'm going to secure that or just fit it on there. And the bottom here has also that same thing. Although it may tilt a little, it shouldn't fall over. But here it is. The first time, this is the first time in about a year and a half that I've been able to see this thing as one piece. And that's really one of the big challenges of working with a gemstone, especially in pieces. For me, I can't always know what the thing's going to look like in the end. I have to kind of assume that this is going to work out, and I can't always see the composition until it's pinned and put together. So sometimes when I get to a point like this, I have to change it and rework it in some way to get the balance correct. You know, I'm going to turn it around so the light comes at it differently, and you can maybe see the features a bit different. So if we go from this angle and the camera comes around this side, then I think the features of the face will show more. And you can also get the sparkle in the base, which is a Venetian glass, this base, and it has copper infused into the surface, so it really looks like it's fun. It's really a nice kind of a fantasy look to the whole thing. So this is going to be finished today. It's just a little more sanding and then a little more of fitting, and I should have it finished today. So I wanted to show you because maybe next week it won't be here, so there's an opportunity to see it as a completed piece. So I posed a question today with my opening post that when do you consider yourself to be an artist? And I think that's kind of fun because it's an interesting idea. I know a lot of people say to people that are creative, they say, "Hey, you're a very good artist," or you're wonderful at the things that you do. But sometimes, as an artist, you don't always feel that way. And I think it's an interesting question because in art school, we used to pose that question in some of our classes, philosophically speaking, like when do you become an artist, or when is it a piece of art? And I think it's kind of a relevant thing to ask about yourself. When do you think of yourself as an artist? And I know there's a lot of people that say, "Oh, I wish I could be an artist. I wish I was." But how do you determine that? Who says? Do you make that decision yourself? Do the people that see the things you make tell you that you're an artist and then you assume that? It's an interesting question because I think I grew up with this idea that I was an artist. It's just the way it was. I loved to be creative when I was very, very young, and I think in my family they just said, "Okay, you're an artist." And I went, "What does that mean?" I didn't know. I just assumed the role. So in my life, my challenge has always been with the things that I make is to make them artistic. That's something I really strive to do. Sometimes things are more artistic than other times, but that's my goal as an artist, to be as creative as possible with what I do and to be as artistic as I can be. What does that mean? Well, I think that's a very personal question, but how do you determine you are an artist? I know that our son, Curtis, who is manning the camera here, he decided he was an artist when he was 12 years old. I can remember the time he stood up and said, "I'm an artist. Look at what I'm doing. I'm an artist." So he decided. And I think with encouragement from his parents that, at some point, we knew he was a creative person and we encouraged the artistic aspect of his personality. And so he was able to make that decision really easily in his life. And I think it's a determination that we all need to make. I have a person I know that always wanted to be a painter, and maybe you'll recognize the story. But he had a job. He had to do his job most of his life, like for 35 years, and then he retired. And he decided at that point, I want to be a painter. I always wanted to be a painter. And so at a later time in his life, just picked up the paints and then started painting. And would I call him an artist? Absolutely. Very much an artist. But what was he before? He was a guy that worked had a job. And so how do you make that determination in your life? Do you just kind of decide at one point you're going to be an artist? So I'd like to hear your comments. Give me an idea what you think. When do you become an artist? Do you make that up in your own mind, or do you wait for people to tell you from seeing what you do, what you like to make, and the things that you do. So you wait for people's comments and say, oh, that's very artistic, and then you decide. Or, is it something you've been born with, or is it something that you've been conditioned to believe? I think that might be a very important question there. Is it a thing you've been conditioned to believe? So some people are conditioned to believe they are not creative. And the truth is we're all creative. But you have to believe that. When you believe it, I think that's the truth. That's when you become the thing or the idea. So I wanted to show you a few other things here in the studio. There's some pieces that were on the go. The last live Facebook we did. And here they are complete. Like this is a whale piece, and I think we were working on this pattern here in the base, trying to get that as straight lined as possible in there. And so this is it complete. It's all one thing. It doesn't come apart in any way. So it's a fun thing. I really like this piece too. Just the simplistic line of it, and so I love the flow of the piece. And here's another piece that here's the beginnings of it as a template in paper, and it's a quartz crystal polar bear with a seal. Now, I always say the creative process is very messy. It's not a straightforward, I got an idea and I'm going to complete it and that's the end of it. The creative process is a twisted and complex process that doesn't necessarily come out with a satisfying result. It's a thing that you have to work at, I have to work at, to satisfy my artistic intention as I go through. So this piece was intended to be on this base right here. This was what I designed it to be part of. But as it went along, like we went to a great deal of trouble to even make this the way it was, and then put the bear on top. But in the end, it just didn't work. For me, the idea of it sitting on the top there without the storyline the way I wanted to see it wasn't very clear. So I came up with a different kind of base, and now I've got a little citrine seal with it, and so we're telling the story. The bear is looking for something, and then the seal is right beside him and saying, well, what's happening? What are you looking for? And we all know he's looking for something to eat. So it's a famous, or maybe it's an interesting story that I like to tell often in my pieces is, the little guy always wins. And so here's the story of the hunt, and the little guy is completely safe in his inquisitive attitude towards the polar bear. The polar bear is completely in his other world. So he has the opportunity, he's the observer of the action here, and has the freedom to come and go. So I like that. I like the story that the little guy can be free and get away. So that's part of my personality, I guess. That's what I share a lot of, or that's what I do. I share my personality in all the artwork. And that was a question that Curtis posed to me today when we were looking at the face of the genie. He says, like, okay, who does that look like? And, as an artist, and without having like a life model to copy from, I use my imagination. Your imagination draws on what you're most familiar with. And your own face is usually what happens when you're doing things like this, is it gets put into the subject matter. So it's always a thing you have to be careful with, I think. But yeah, so interesting question. When are you an artist? Do you have to do something like this before you're considered an artist? Or do you have to do something like this before you're creative? I don't think so. I think you can be creative with a lot of different ways, a lot of different things. I don't think technique and craftsmanship are always the call to artistic recognition. So there's a lot of people that are not very capable with their craft, but they're still considered artistic. And so I think for me, though, in the materials we work with, that it's really important to be very high skilled in the craft area of the materials you work with, and then through that you can be creative. But there's other materials that you don't necessarily have to be too careful with your craft. So, so I think you can be creative that way. And are you an artist because you work with jade? That's another really great question, I think, because that's a big part of my life. But are you an artist because you work with jade? Is jade the reason that you can be called an artist? That's another really great question. Is jade the reason that you can become an artist? So you put the materials before the subject, or the materials before the creation. Now that's a really good question to ask. Because I think if you do, then you're not an artist, you're a craftsman. So you're working with materials and you let the material be what it is. But if you're an artist, you work on a different kind of idea, different sort of a frequency. It doesn't matter what material it is in. And it just so happens that it's part of your process. And the materials add to your artistic endeavor. They enhance what you're trying to create. Like as in the polar bear, for instance, with the quartz. It wouldn't be as interesting, I think, if it was some other kind of material, but the quartz really makes it a very interesting subject and a very ethereal kind of approach to it. So, materials can have their bearing on what you do creatively, but the material does not make you the artist. So, love to hear your comments. So, give me a few questions and comments. I appreciate it, and I'll get back to you throughout the day. But thanks for being with me, and look forward to sharing a sculpture from the past next week. I have a piece that I want to show you that was made in 1977, a piece I made in 1977. And I think you'll really enjoy it, and it's another great way to talk about creativity. So thanks for being with me, and stay creative. Bye for now.